So yeah, I started out as a seasonal firefighter with CDF at the time, with CAL FIRE back in 1987, and had spent some time in local government as a reserve firefighter as I was going through college, right out of high school as well. And it's been my passion for my entire career and professional life to be engaged in fire and resource management and forestry issues. Like most young firefighters, you start out with the adrenaline rush, and that's what's really driving you. But it was really over time that I recognized, especially after spending 10 years in Southern California, just what challenges we face in California in fire and in resource management, and particularly working in the urban interface. And in 2010, as Mark pointed out, I was appointed by the then outgoing Governor Schwarzenegger as the interim director of CAL FIRE and California State Forester. And then working into the Governor Brown administration, was appointed as the permanent director of CAL FIRE in 2011. And I served throughout the rest of Governor Brown's term and then retired at the end of 2018. And if you'd have thought when I started out my career in the fire service at 17 that I would have ended that career with the kinds of fires and the conditions we were facing and continue to face, I certainly could never have imagined or predicted that. I retired in December of 18, right as we were in the midst of working on the recovery from the Camp Fire in Paradise. And really the 5 or 6 years prior to that, every year we were just getting more extreme conditions, and we were seeing more significant impact from wildfire, from the Rim Fire in Yosemite in 2013, and the Camp and the Butte and the Valley fires that burned in Amador and Calaveras and in Lake counties in 2015. And of course, right here in El Dorado County in 2014, both the Sand Fire in South County and then the King Fire, just a month later, obviously up along the Highway 50 corridor. And then of course, just this, within the last 2 years, the Caldor Fire, bringing over 220,000 acres, literally starting 6 or so miles from where I live, or am now living in South County, and then burning to Lake Tahoe. And I don't think any of us could have imagined that those kinds of fires would be happening. And while that fire was going on, of course, the Dixie Fire was burning almost 1 million acres. Both fires burning literally across the Sierra Crest. And of course, wouldn't necessarily happen this year with 50 feet of snow on the top, but the fact that we had no snowpack early in the summer months, and a fire could actually burn its way across through the granite and end up into the eastern slope of the Sierra. But that's the reality of the conditions we're facing and our impacts to our county and our communities. Grizzly Flats, South Lake Tahoe, this last year, of course, with the Mosquito Fire and Volcanoville. We're seeing extreme fire behavior and whole of communities being impacted to levels that we've never seen before. So all of that for me I felt I had more to offer and want to stay engaged while I still have the interest and have the ability to do that. And so I engaged with the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council. I stepped in to help chair, and we'll talk about the council here in a moment. And then also I'm working, as Mark mentioned, with our local Fire Safe Council in Ockham Fairplay. And then that led to some other things that are going on that we'll talk about. So I thought today really just kind of give you an overview of the Fire Safe Council, and then some of the things that Mark talked about that are going on at the county level post Caldor Fire and the engagement that's going on to help coordinate there. And then talk about things that are available in programs to all of us in the county and what we need to be doing. There's some really exciting and interesting things going on here locally that also have implications statewide, and the county is really on the cusp of engaging in some pilot programs there. And then kind of where are we going from here? Again, because we have 50 feet of snow on the top of the Sierra doesn't mean that fire season is not coming and that we're in great shape for decades to come. This is not uncommon for this. We just haven't had this kind of winter for a while. So talk a little bit about where we think things are this year and going into to the next year. So perfect, thank you. So the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council, it's a fully nonprofit organization, and the mission is to protect the people of El Dorado County and their property from the effects of catastrophic wildfire through education, cooperation, innovation, and action. And again, it's truly an all-volunteer organization set up by community members. Really got its energy and it's been around for several decades, but it was really revitalized about 10 years ago, and then certainly after the Camp Fire in 2018, a lot of energy going into the program. edcfiresafe.org, that's the best place to go. That's the Fire Safe Council's website. A lot of information is attached to that website. A lot of the things we'll talk about today are available there. I will caution everybody that the website is undergoing some major revisions. We've outgrown the capacity of the website because there is so much going on with the various programs. But with some patience over the next month or so, this will be back on track to be more user-friendly. But this really is the hub where the information is located. As I mentioned, it's an all-volunteer 501c3 organization. The uniqueness about the El Dorado County Fire Safe Council, it's the umbrella organization to what are now 29 associate fire safe councils that are spread across the county. And obviously can't see everything in the back on the map, but the colored areas give you sort of the picture of where the 29 fire safe councils are. And each of them have their own flavor and personalities, and were organized for different reasons at their community level. Some, particularly Grizzly Flats Fire Safe Council, which has been engaged for a number of years now, has been very active in work on the ground and helping secure grants, and very active ongoing community. Where others have been put together for short, different activities to work on a fire-wise community or another activity, and then may or may not be super active. And so they all sort of have different layers. Plus, like every organization, just like you mentioned a few bit ago at the intro, getting volunteers and folks to engage is an ongoing process, and it's always challenging. It's typically 10% of the people doing 90% of the work, and it takes those spark plugs to keep the community energized and people going. And the fire safe councils are no different. But the challenge with the good and the bad of the Fire Safe Council program is that, again, pretty much following the 2018 fire season, and particularly the Camp Fire, communities really organized. People got scared. We were losing our ability to get insurance. We were seeing whole communities be destroyed. We were looking at all the cascading impacts that are coming from wildland fires. And the fires themselves are just, the emergency itself is just the small piece. It's all of the recovery efforts that follow a wildfire that take years to put back. And so communities started organizing and saying, what do we need to do to prevent this and to mitigate the impacts? And so we were seeing where we started off with maybe 10 or 12 fire safe councils within El Dorado County just a few years ago. We've now blossomed to 29, and they continue to have additional interest. I think there are one or two more that are reaching out right now that are interested. But what's also important to point out on this map is where there is no color, and in particular, the white areas intermixed and into the west, to the left side there. Much of the west slope of the county does not have an organized fire safe council effort. And that, again, could be for a variety of reasons. The local communities determine their own boundaries, and then those boundaries are adopted and sort of put into the bigger picture. Again, it just depends on interest and organization at that local level. But there are always opportunities for new councils to organize if there's that grassroots effort to do that. Before we talk about the resources, the challenge, again, when we talk about the good and the bad, the good is this interest level. 29 fire safe councils. The challenge is trying to support that level of need. The umbrella fire safe council, the county fire safe council, again, it's all volunteer, and it is trying to support now insurance and grant applications and just the day-to-day business process of all of these new fire-safe councils. And so we're really looking at more efficient ways and new models to help support this really burgeoning interest in our communities to make our communities more fire resilient. There are a number of resources that are available that are the key resources through the Fire-Safe Council. One is doing defensible space assessments. Many of the 29 Fire-Safe Councils offer the opportunity for Fire-Safe Council members who are trained to come out and do a complimentary evaluation of your property. And it's done to the same standard that the fire agencies, CAL FIRE, and our local fire districts are using. It's non-punitive. It's the information isn't given to CAL FIRE or a fire district to come back out and cite you. The whole idea is to provide information to help community members accomplish the fire-safe improvements that are needed around your property. One, to ensure you can comply with the state and local ordinances, but more importantly, to ensure your home and the surrounding area is more fire-safe. So you can get an assessment. You can also get help, particularly seniors, low income, and veterans have the opportunity through the Defensible Space Assistance Program. That program started off with about $5,000, and it was a grant or a sort of a stipend, if you will, from, I believe, the Friends of Seniors. And then the Veterans Commission provided some additional money, some $5,000. And the folks would go out and do maybe 10 parcels a year to help the key seniors who had identified they had need. Well, the program has absolutely grown and blossomed. The interest level is so high that the program will open for a day and then have to close because the money that was available quickly goes away and quickly is used up. So this has been an area where now a number of other funding sources, the PG&E has provided this last year $100,000, SMUD has provided some funding, and the county has provided what's called Title III. It's federal monies that come to the county in lieu of the taxes that aren't, the property taxes that aren't secured from the federal land that don't pay property tax. And so that money's coming back to the county, and the county's made a commitment to provide some of that back to this program to help seniors and veterans and low income. So this program is well funded right now. The challenge we have is of course, these conditions aren't conducive to getting defensible space work done, but that will quickly change, we know, later this spring. And so as a senior or as a member of the community that's eligible, you can simply go to the website and apply, and an evaluator will come out and assess your property and determine what work needs to get done, up to a cap. I believe it's about $1,000 worth of effort, and then they will schedule a contractor to come out and complete that work and then sign that off. And so I encourage folks definitely to look into that program and take advantage of it. We also have a chipping service that's available, and this is well funded right now. It's over $1.2 million funded through a CAL FIRE fire prevention grant. And this program is available to anybody in El Dorado County to come and chip up to 6 hours worth of free chipping to a homeowner. But the material has to have already been cleared from creating your defensible space and then providing it at the curb. And so the downside of this is it doesn't provide the workforce to physically do the work. It just provides that opportunity to have it chipped and removed from your property. But again, it's definitely a valuable opportunity, especially if communities get together and organize and get some chipping days done. And the third real program that the Fire Safe Council is sponsoring that's coming online here in the next several months is a hazardous tree removal program in specified areas. And I believe that's being broadened out, but right now, certainly from Omo Ranch to Pollock Pines, a large swath of the area is eligible for individual hazard tree removal, something that we have not been able to do prior. It's a more technical and hazardous operation because these are larger trees that require technical contractors to come out and make that happen. There's a sliding scale of eligibility based on income levels, but there are opportunities here again to have hazardous trees removed that pose a wildfire threat. So that program will be up and running, as I said, in a few months, and it will also be on the website as the opportunity to apply there. So the challenge that came again with the success of the efforts that the Fire Safe Council had been doing along with the associate Fire Safe Councils over the past several years has been its ability to acquire grants and to be successful in getting those grants. And at this point, the County Fire Safe Council is managing almost $14 million in grants that have come to the council, and it's for a variety of efforts that are going on. We just this last year completed the Community Wildfire Protection Planning Update for those Fire Safe Councils that you saw on that map earlier. We'll talk a little bit later, but the county is going to step in and help update all of that, and we'll talk about where that's going. But that's one of the things that the Fire Safe Council acquired a grant to help with the planning and identify projects. Hazardous fuels reduction efforts. This is an area where the Fire Safe Council has been very successful. Currently implementing a $2 million hazardous fuels treatment project in South County. 6 of the Fire Safe Councils in the south part of the county got together, put together a grant application to CAL FIRE, and then sponsored by, again, the County Fire Safe Council. But it's looking at roadside hazardous fuels reduction in partnership with where the Department of Transportation right-of-way is, so it's working outside of that. There's additional areas where fuel breaks are being put in several strategic locations. All of this is in process right now. They're reaching out to get right of entry agreements from homeowners so they can get the work done on the properties that are adjacent to these roadside treatment areas, or they're within those roadside treatment areas. So that's a $2 million project. And then on the divide in the north part of the county, probably close to $6 million in projects related to roadside hazardous fuels reduction, as well as fuel breaks and other efforts going on, both from fire prevention and forest health grants from CAL FIRE, along with the Bureau of Land Management and other sources. So when you add it all up, again, it's a lot of money, but it's also a lot of administrative work because there's reporting, there's invoicing, all of that. And the reason it's been successful is because of the partnership with the El Dorado and Georgetown Resource Conservation Districts, who have been the partner in helping manage the projects that the Fire Safe Council is managing fiscally. The RCD is actually hiring contractors and coordinating getting the work done out on the ground. And so this really is the mainstay of what's going on. In addition to fuels reduction efforts, education and outreach. This is a big component of what the Fire Safe Council does, is get information out to the public, shares information, tries to be a two-way conduit for information exchange. They're ramping up the efforts at the county fair. There is now 6 organizations are together that will happen again this year at the El Dorado County Fair on Father's Day weekend. And 6 areas being shared by CAL FIRE, the Fire Safe Council, the county, the Forest Service, the fire chiefs, local fire chiefs, and the RCD. So it's really ramping up the efforts in collaboration and working together here in the county. And again, that rolls right into community events and activities. Many of the Fire Safe Councils around the county this year sponsored Greenway Stays. They were provided some funding from the county through Title III and hosted in partnership with El Dorado Disposal Greenway Stays, where dumpsters were provided at a central location, and then on a weekend, several contractors were volunteering their time and equipment as community members brought material. They chipped it and filled the dumpsters, and very successful programs, particularly at the time of year when we're outside of that burning window, or people aren't comfortable doing that, and it provided another option to dispose of material generated from doing fire safe work. So a lot of those kinds of events and activities sponsored by the Fire Safe Council. So we talked about the Caldor fire and all the efforts going on we've talked about with the Fire Safe Councils and others, the resource conservation districts. CAL FIRE has been very active over the years here in Amador and El Dorado counties with efforts helping with fuels treatment and other projects. The Forest Service working on a number of projects, particularly along Highway 50, but in other areas of the National Forest as well. But what was discovered really after the Caldor fire, the Board of Supervisors looked at it and said, we know there are lots of things going on in El Dorado County, but What we're seeing and hearing post the Caldor fire is that we could do a better job of coordinating efforts. A lot of this work that's going on seems to be siloed, and what stood out for them in particular was they had heard that engine companies, firefighters, were actually having to do defensible space around homes ahead of the flaming front, just hours before the fire reached homes during the fire, rather than having that work all done by the homeowner prior to that occurring. And that really struck a nerve with the board and raised a really significant level of concern as to why aren't we getting this done? Why aren't we accomplishing that ahead of time? So the board directed the chief administrative officer at the county to form a working group, put folks together to talk about that and make some recommendations as to where to go forward. So a working group, which ultimately became an advisory committee, was established. Again, it was the core organizations and agencies in the county that are dealing with wildfire prevention and fuels treatment. And that, again, goes back to the same organizations that I mentioned, the Fire Safe Council, Forest Service, CAL FIRE, the RCD, and the fire districts. The group made some recommendations back to the Board of Supervisors in March of last year, and they said, yep, lots of good things going on. We learned a lot of good lessons from the Caldor. Some successes were the work along Highway 50. It's called Fire Adapted 50 in that area east of Placerville, mostly Camino, Pollock Pines, up to Kybers, where for a number of years after the King Fire, agencies were working together to do fuels treatment on both sides of Highway 50. There were some key areas in Sly Park, along Jenkinson Lake, where fuels treatments had occurred that made a key difference in helping slow the spread of the Caldor fire in that location. Other examples, around the county of where things have been working and on smaller scales. But what we also saw was that we aren't seeing the level of coordinated approach to messaging. We aren't all aligned in looking at what we're doing together. We are siloed, that everybody's applying for the millions of dollars in grant funding that's available independently, without really stepping back and looking at it holistically in the county as a plan to see who is the best organization to apply, what are our priorities in the county, so that when we spend the effort to write grants and put work on the ground, is it in the right place? Is it having the biggest impact? And are we not duplicating efforts or conflicting with our partners across the county? So the recommendations were to have the working group help adjudicate and come up with a process to help provide that coordination. It also made a recommendation that the county, and as Mark mentioned, step up and establish its own Office of Wildfire Preparedness. And this was important because the county has a responsibility that it's recognizing when these wildfires occur. I mean, there are some basic responsibilities to compliance with the building and fire codes here in the county to ensure that buildings are built to the building standards for wildland-urban interface. And in the state, those laws changed in 2008 to require a significant change in building construction for home hardening. Obviously, non-combustible roofs, but more importantly, siding, windows, eaves, all the things to resist intrusion of sparks or direct flame impact. All those are things that the county has a responsibility to ensure are incorporated when new building permits are issued. But there's planning efforts that need to occur. Ultimately, when a fire occurs and we have communities like Grizzly Flat that suffer such a significant loss, the responsibility ultimately ends up back with the county to ensure the recovery efforts have occurred and that these parcels are put back in a state that can be rebuilt. And all that support, despite we know there's tons of support that comes from the federal and state government through this process, but ultimately the county has a responsibility, bears that responsibility ultimately. So the county needs to really define its own future, and by putting in mitigation efforts to try to reduce the impact of these communities and such the impact of the county. So the county really recognizes it needed to be a big player in helping facilitate and coordinate these efforts around the county. So it established an office. The office is still in the works and standing up. I stepped in at the request of the chief administrative office to help facilitate part-time bringing that together. and we continue to work on that. The key piece has been the advisory committee and what it's bringing to the table in the coordination between agencies and organizations. And right now, in fact, they'll be meeting on Monday, it's this coordinated messaging piece. We want to make sure that when we're talking about projects and work that's going on around the county, that the fire safe councils are able to articulate the same information and be part of developing that information, as is CAL FIRE and our fire districts and our other partners. And so there's really an effort to try to unify the messaging so it's simple for our communities to understand, but it also shows the level of effort and commitment that's going on, not only by our agencies and organizations, but what's expected of all of us as community members. As part of this advisory committee, there are a number of initiatives that are beginning to develop underneath that. There's an organizational chart that's breaking out what are some of the key things that need to happen in the county to really move us forward and make a resilient El Dorado County. And this was important enough for the Board of Supervisors that they changed and updated the strategic plan for the county last March that added a theme to the highest levels of the county's strategic plan that says we will work towards a wildfire resilient El Dorado County, and we will work on a wildfire strategy that helps pull all of this together. And that's what the advisory committee is working under, that direction. And to make that happen, they've built this organizational chart that has the ability to pull together various working groups of the stakeholders across the county to work on various initiatives. The coordinated messaging is a whole initiative in and of itself to bring people together to talk about the same processes. The one that's really gained the most traction and is working the hardest right now is this home hardening and defensible space program. Folks may know about, for a long time, we've always heard CAL FIRE for years talk about, do your defensible space, do your defensible space. Well, several years ago, El Dorado County stepped up and passed its own ordinance to mirror that so that local fire chiefs in the county could also enforce the same level of defensible space requirements around homes. So what the Defensible Space Working Group has been working on is, number one, the California Public Resources Code is the authority by which CAL FIRE has the ability to enforce defensible space requirements. Those requirements out to, up to 100 feet, and this talks about 200 feet, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the law requires, and there's a lot changing in this space, but there are zones, and it requires clearance out to, and work to be done out to 100 feet. This is for, under the Public Resources Code, areas within what's called state responsibility area. Those non-incorporated areas, almost predominantly the wildland areas that aren't federal, the private forest and wildlands around El Dorado County, which makes up a much of the area in El Dorado County, is considered, that isn't national forest, is considered state responsibility area. The Public Resources Code applies to all of us in those areas, and that's where the authority to enforce the state's defensible space requirements comes from, and CAL FIRE has historically been the one responsible for making that happen. Now in El Dorado County, we have it's a vegetation management defensible space ordinance, and it mirrors the state's code, but then also provides some additional opportunities to provide clearance on a neighboring property if a structure is within 100 feet of the property line and we need to get to the neighbor's property to achieve that 100 foot of clearance for the home. But the real important piece of it is allows for the county to be able to enforce the same standards that the state's able to enforce through the Public Resources Code. What the working group's been doing all year is updating that ordinance for the county and talking about opportunities to bring in things like critical infrastructure. So for example, the cell phone towers there's no authority within the Public Resources Code or currently within the county ordinance to mandate a cell phone company to clear around their property. And what we know is we've had significant challenges in these catastrophic fires with losing cellular communications because the facilities burn up. or the infrastructure to them are destroyed. And so this is sort of looking at the ordinance rewrite has taken a really hard look at what that critical infrastructure is that needs to be protected and is bringing that into the ordinance. So some changes will be coming before the Board of Supervisors here in the next several months to help upgrade that. Hasn't changed any of the responsibilities for us as homeowners. It's still our responsibility to work both under these. What is coming for all of us, and this is important, is this area. It's called the 5-foot zone, the ember exclusion zone around our homes. What we're finding is that how a home is built and the vegetation, particularly right around it, is key as to whether that home survives a fire. And it has to do with the ability for embers to get into the building, also the direct flame or radiant heat contact with the building. Vegetation in this 5-foot zone is being found to have a direct impact in putting heat and embers inside and up against the home. And so the law changed. They're currently finishing the rules here as to how it will be applied. But ultimately, this is going to where there's no vegetation in this 5-foot zone. And then as you get out into the 30-foot zone, it's the heavily modified vegetation, mowing the grass, clearing the trees, et cetera. And then as you get out from 30 to 100 foot, it's more focusing on limbing up trees and spacing between vegetation. So more will be coming out on this, and this is not just a county ordinance. This is state. This will be a statewide change that will be implemented here before too long. All the fire agencies and organizations, Fire Safe Council, everyone in El Dorado County feels very strongly that defensible space and hardening our homes to ensure they meet fire-resistive construction standards is probably the number one thing we can be doing in the wildland-urban interface to reduce the risk of losing individual homes and communities. To that end, the working group, in addition to updating the ordinance, is working very hard to implement a very robust program for defensible space across El Dorado County. And this doesn't mean going out and citing everybody under these ordinances. It's quite the opposite. It's a teamwork between CAL FIRE and the fire districts and the Fire Safe Councils to accommodate the defensible space assessments I talked about earlier that are done voluntarily by Fire Safe Councils, along with the fire agencies doing inspections, but to roll all that up into one program, to reach out and contact as many homeowners and assist them each year as possible. Right now, there are about 55,000 homes in El Dorado County that reside within the very high fire hazard severity zone. The working group is recommending that we try to target as many of those 55,000 homes as the priority. Even if we only touch 7,000 or 8,000 a year, over time, we will ultimately get to everyone and then can circle back and continue to assist. But the idea is to make contacts, help every homeowner accomplish this defensible space work. Does it mean ultimately that some may end up, those folks that just refuse to comply, no matter how much we all work and how much peer pressure we as neighbors put on? There certainly is that opportunity for the citation portion of the county ordinance to be engaged, but for the most part, they're going to be the exception. The real opportunity here is to double down our efforts to make landowner contacts and outreach and do it in a coordinated way. The state has prepared standards for doing defensible space and home hardening evaluations. The county is adopting those. We're bringing the Train the Trainer program in 2 weeks to El Dorado County to train our fire agencies and fire safe councils. They, in turn, will become the training team that will be training all of our Fire Safe Council evaluators at the Fire Safe Councils over several training sessions this spring, and those folks will be out to assist community members. So this is a huge step forward. It's a 2-day training class for these Fire Safe Council volunteers now to come out and gather all this information that we need homeowners to have to be able to do that. And we want to be able to track that information so we can share our successes and how we're working with folks. So this is probably the number one focus that the Fire Safe Councils and the county and our fire districts have been working on this spring when it comes to fire prevention. Address marking really is to me, probably the second most important thing that homeowners need to be thinking of after defensible space and home hardening. And that's this piece, because it's particularly for all those of us living in the rural parts, the particularly more rural parts of the county, address marking and finding those places in the middle of the night is extremely challenging. And it's not just from wildfire. It's even more important just because of medical emergencies when you're trying to have your fire agencies find you in the middle of the night down rural roads like many of us live on. And in our county, like many counties, we rely on an integrated fire protection system. It may not, if you live in Diamond Springs, it may not be the Diamond Springs Fire Department that comes to your medical emergency that day, because there may be other activity going on in this county, and all the fire departments work together, and it's the closest set of resources that go to any of these calls. And if Diamond Springs is busy, you may have El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, or El Dorado County Fire responding to a call at your home. And that's why it's important to ensure, and they may not be familiar with your neighborhood, so that's why it's important to ensure you've done everything to help them understand how to take the guesswork out of getting to your home. So there's a standard now for reflective signs. It's out there in the statutes, but the bottom line is it's a reflective 4-inch lettering, and we have actually at least one fire safe council making these for, I believe it's $25 a sign now that will make, you can order one, and he can make those and get them out to you. The Occam Fairplay Fire Safe Council actually is doing that, and it's become very popular. But I would encourage everybody to go to, if you haven't already, get a reflective address sign out front to get that done. Defensible space contractors. They're, particularly when fire seasons start and we get into that wildfire preparedness window, and with all the fires that have been occurring and so much attention, there have been a lot of contractors that are out there marketing. And there's some things that are important to understand. Shop around. There's opportunities to find some information out. Look at getting more than one bid. Just because you see an advertisement or someone saying something, you have opportunities to get multiple bids, and you really should. Ensure that they're licensed as a state contractor. Get references for previous projects that the contractor has done. Make sure you've agreed to and this is where it gets a little bit nebulous, is because doing defensible space work around your home isn't always black and white or cut and dry. There is some finesse, and there's some judgment calls on which vegetation to remove and what that needs to look like. And so it's ensuring that you have a good understanding of what you need to get done and of what they're offering to get done, and that you're in agreement as to what that's going to be. And again, if you have questions about that after you have met with a contractor, you should contact your fire agency or CAL FIRE to come out. You can also contact your local fire safe council, and an evaluator can also help. But if you're not sure, definitely ask. And then obviously make sure that these folks are insured. These are potentially risky types of activities that could be happening. There can be damage if materials are dropped on your home or your car, all of that. So just ensure that they are insured. Where to go? Our local newspapers and the Gold Pan or the Mountain Democrat often advertise. That's certainly a valuable resource to go to look at contractors to meet with. The Fire Safe Council website, the one I mentioned earlier, has all of this information on how to hire a contractor and things to look for and more. There is also a list of contractors, arborists, foresters, that is available on that website as well. I only caution you that it is not completely up to date. So it may be a place to start, but it may not be 100% current. And then I also it's the word of mouth. A lot of these contractors participate in Fire Safe Council meetings. A lot of neighbors in these communities have already used folks that swear by them. And so there's just opportunity to talk to other people and what they've, who has done their work. And you can go out and see that work to see if it's what you like. So word of mouth tends to be probably the most critical piece. I wanted to just throw the piece in about debris burning. This is always a challenge for a lot of different reasons. And many of us are more comfortable doing this than others. There are ups and downs and risks, of course, with all of this. And What I would encourage is that it's the permitting process is the first piece that can be a challenge. And it's to understand that the period of time we're in right now, no declared fire season, no permit from CAL FIRE is required to do burning on your property right now. What is required if your pile is larger than 4 feet by 4 feet anytime during the year is you are required to have a permit from AQMD, from the Air Quality Management District. And that permit can be accessed right online through the Air Quality website. It's very simple, and it has all of the information that you need to get the permit, and it allows you a window of time to do your burning. During fire season, early in the year in particular, CAL FIRE requires a permit. Everything up to 4 feet by 4 feet, that permit can be obtained online now from CAL FIRE, and I believe it lasts for 3 years now. And so I would just encourage you, regardless if you're going to do any burning, get that CAL FIRE permit and get your AQMD permit, and then you're covered no matter what. When you start getting into pile sizes that are larger than 4 by 4, many of us are doing other kinds of fuels treatment and work, that tends to require a little different permit from CAL FIRE and potentially them coming out and making some inspections. And so just keep that in mind, and if you have questions there, work with your local CAL FIRE. And this time of year, obviously many of the fire stations are closed, but you can always contact the Camino office of CAL FIRE. And then of course several key fire stations are remaining open all year. The Station 43, the El Dorado fire station at the Y, is open year-round, and then on the Amador side, and which would also service people in South County at Sutter Hill, there by Martell, is open year-round, and that's as a minimum. So, and you can certainly, the Cameron Park Fire Department is CAL FIRE also, and so you can certainly ask there. And any of the fire districts are also somewhat versed on all of these permits. So it's important to that. And then, of course, monitoring whether it's a burn day from an air quality perspective or not. Every day, air quality issues the burn day status, usually 3 o'clock the afternoon before. So just some things to pay attention to. The challenge is when we start ramping up into fire season, particularly with the last several seasons, what we're seeing is very hard closures and shutdowns of burning, period, usually happening mid to late June. But typically now by July 4th, all burning is banned, regardless, for residential property owners until we get measurable rain later in the season. So it's just, again, those that have been doing it for a while have this down, but it's just something to pay attention to because it is something that gets people real excited. And typically what happens is we go that whole summer with no burning. We've built up material, and then as soon as we get the rain on the very first day of burning, everybody's burning, and we get a whole bunch of escapes because conditions aren't quite ready yet. So again, lots of caution there. I wanted to touch on evacuations for a minute too, because this has come up a lot. And the fire safe councils and the county's Office of Wildfire Preparedness aren't engaging directly in the evacuation realm, if you will, other than helping be part of the education process. And this is where it's important for everyone to understand that evacuations are initiated by, and they are the authority of the law enforcement agency having jurisdiction. So Placerville PD, South Lake Tahoe PD, or El Dorado County Sheriff's Office, primarily EDSO for most of us. Evacuation routes are identified during a fire based on the location of the fire and the anticipated direction of spread. This EDSO law enforcement gets directly with the fire incident commanders, and they talk about where they think the fire's going, what the anticipated rates of spread, what communities could be impacted, and then they work out an evacuation strategy based upon that. Every fire burns differently. It starts in different places. It burns under different weather conditions, and different times of day. All of that influences rates of spread, the direction of travel, and which ingress and egress routes may or may not be compromised, or which ones may be the best to be able to be utilized. This is important because this is why the El Dorado Sheriff's Office isn't producing a list of hard and fast evacuation routes, because they can change. They can change in the middle of a fire, and they don't want to put signs out there saying this is an evacuation route, and then when the fire happens, it's where the fire is. So what we tell everybody is every main artery, every road is a potential evacuation route. And so we need to be treating all of our roads, the maintenance, all the things that we do to ensure they can be used. But most importantly, then when the fire is occurring, it's paying attention to the real-time information that's coming out from the sheriff's office and from the fire agencies about where evacuation orders and warnings are being issued, and where fires, where the evacuation routes are. This can change in 10 minutes, and it's very hard with social media, everybody wanting to know instantaneously what a fire's doing and where it's going. Fire officials don't even know if they're still responding to the fire, and so it's very dynamic. It's important to understand and know where all of your roads are, know where you would go, have backup plans for different roads, fully understand all of that before the fire's happening, so that when things do change on the fly, you can react to that accordingly and be ready to do that. What I would encourage everybody is that Dorado County utilized Code Red up until last year, and that was a national system that provided, you've heard, reverse 911, the notification system. The system here that was used was Code Red, and you sign up under your cell phone and your landline, your house phone, and it provides that push out to you of notifications from law enforcement of, well, anything that they need to notify you of on an emergency basis, but in particular, evacuation routes or other evacuation warnings and orders and anything else related to life and safety during an emergency. Code Red has transitioned to what's now called RAVE, and it is a statewide program. The sheriff's office was migrating everybody over to that, but everyone's encouraging folks to go back into RAVE and make sure that you are signed up specifically in case that did not occur. So you can go to the Dorado County Sheriff's Office, ready.edso.org, ready.edso.org, and that will take you through the sign-up process. I absolutely encourage everybody, if you haven't done that, to do that. Yes?
So I have a question. How the fire safe councils, because they're local, each group that you pointed out are local, how are you working with the Office of Emergency Services and EDSO to get people out? In other words, you're talking about evacuation routes. There are some people that don't drive anymore. They may be in wheelchairs. They may be living alone. They may have memory deficits and not understand what's going on. They may not have anywhere to go. Who's working on identifying those folks and helping get them out?
So the question was for the greater group, case they can't hear, was how are the fire safe councils and others working with the sheriff's department and others on ensuring that local communities where folks don't drive, aren't able to, aren't mobile, may have baseline medical conditions, things, and aren't able to evacuate or need special assistance for evacuation during a fire. Absolutely a very good question. So the fire safe councils don't have any public safety responsibility. The agencies do, but the fire safe councils work ahead of time to provide that education and connection so that they can help identify these members within the community and then find opportunity to connect people up. This, if anybody, with the disasters that we've lived through, the true success is neighbor helping neighbor to be successful. And we saw this during Caldor with moving livestock and other animals. We saw it with other people helping others leave. We don't have enough sheriff's deputies or firefighters to get everyone out. So we, as communities, need to pre-plan and know who our neighbors are, know what conditions that help, have a phone tree, so that when those things do happen, we all know that someone else, we've got someone else that we can take care of, or others know they can depend on our community. There are certain folks that are already identified. If they have baseline medical conditions, they may be already on lists. But at the end of the day, the sheriff's office can't keep a list of the 190,000 residents of Dorado County as to who can't drive. That's up to all of us as community members. So the local fire safe councils work hard to try to connect people up, but at the end of the day, there's no system because it's so dynamic and so cumbersome for public agencies or fire safe councils to keep a list of all of this. So we have to work locally and ensure that our neighbors, we have a process where neighbors can identify that for each other and do that. And there are networks out there. The Dorado County Amateur Radio organization has been working really hard to set up networks to try to help when emergencies, and they've deployed this a lot during the wildfires, is to have that communication network amongst neighbors so that if evacuations are ordered, if things are happening, that they can start communicating internally. And they've got some opportunities with distributing radios and having sort of a radio network to sort of helping do some of that. And I should have said from the beginning that feel free to stop me at any point and ask questions, and we'll certainly do that at the end too. But this is hard in our county because of connectivity, and not all of us are savvy on social media and technology. But absolutely the first place to go is looking at the Twitter feeds, the websites, and the Facebook and the other social media, next door. All of those places are posting information. It's just needing to go to the credible sources. And I think this is the most important piece of all of this, is unless you are seeing evacuation orders from the sheriff's office or a fire agency or one of the credible public agencies, the rest of the things that go out on these different social media sites is just that. It's rumor, it's somebody hearing something on a scanner. Unless it's posted on these sites or forwarded from these sites, from the agencies that are responsible, you need to validate it and check it. This is the important piece. So much panic and misinformation goes out because, of course, we're spreading lots of information out there on social media, and oftentimes it's not accurate. And so it's ensuring you go to the right sources to get that done. And I don't have an answer for people about the fact how dynamic these emergencies are, in particular wildland fires, that they change in minutes, the conditions. And so it's an impossible expectation to think that we as the public are going to know exactly. We see a column of smoke, that we think we're going to know exactly what that fire is doing, where it's going, and where are the evacuations. It changes so quickly. And so for us is having that plan in the beginning, having, we call it ready, set, go, having your go bag, having that plan for what you're going to take, know where you're going to go, have alternate routes. You don't have to wait for an evacuation order or warning to leave. If you're uncomfortable, we all have the opportunity, and it's encouraged to move out of the area early. Then you can reassess the situation. And when more information becomes available about where the fire is going, et cetera, then you can make your own decision about what to do next. But leaving early always gives you options. Leaving late doesn't always give you options. And so again, everyone is encouraged to find that opportunity to leave early. But it goes back to this question, and it's absolutely valid. We as community members have to organize and help each other. No one else is going to be able to do it for us at the level that it requires during these kinds of fires and these emergencies. And it's not just fires, it's the floods and the snow and all of the other impacts that we're experiencing. It has to be neighbor to neighbor helping. So that was a lot, and I don't think that necessarily covered everything out there. I really wanted to leave it open for opportunity for dialogue and questions, anything that you have on your mind relative to this. Ooh, look at that, bright. Let me just put this down, and I will step back into the... Okay, I saw a hand back there first. I'll get everybody, so just keep your hand up.
Working with fire insurance, is that a lobbying effort? What are fire safe councils doing about that?
So fire safe councils are informing and they're engaging. The idea is if we make a resilient county, if we do all the things we're talking about doing, defensible space, home hardening, strategic fuels projects, all of these things to reduce the fire risk, the whole idea is, of course, by doing that, we are fostering an environment that is more insurable. And so the fire safe councils, by our bylaws, we don't lobby. What we want to be is a safe environment for people to exchange information without having to get caught up in, obviously we don't want to have political issues infused, but we do engage with the insurance industry and anyone to talk about what the challenges are and what we can do to be part of the solution. We've hosted the insurance commissioner himself and his staff out here during the Caldor fire because they wanted to see firsthand what work we were doing on the ground in Sly Park and some of these other areas. And they wanted to see what the challenges were in some of these communities and why we were having fire issues. And so absolutely, from an educational perspective, we engage the insurance commission, the companies and others. We're working with insurance companies here locally, brokers and others trying to come up with solutions and providing that information. Let's see, I'm gonna just go here and then I'll just keep working over.
If you're not in one of these already formed fire safe council communities or areas or whatever you call them, can you still access all the services?
Yes.
You know, the consultation, the chipper, the whatever, it's available?
Yes, all of the question is if you're not in one of the 29 Associate Fire Safe Council boundaries, can you still access the programs that the umbrella Fire Safe Council offers? And the answer is yes. The only thing where we're working out are the actual defensible space evaluations, the voluntary evaluations. Those are being supported only within the individual councils. However, they have never turned anybody down that I believe outside of their area if they call up. And we're just trying to build more capacity so we can fill in those gaps. But absolutely the chipping program, the senior program for defensible space are all eligible for anybody on the west slope of the county. Yes. All right, let's go here. And I apologize, but I'm gonna get everybody, so.
I really feel this is, perhaps you're gonna laugh at me asking.
Never.
I've been evacuated since I moved here 30 years ago, probably about 3 times. Nobody has ever been able to tell me what you do with your propane tank. I mean, are you supposed to shut the propane off at your home? Because during the last fire, mine did something, but it took out half a tree. So it obviously released, and whatever released out of it caught fire. So half a tree was burned. But what are you supposed to do when you leave the house with your propane tank?
So it isn't out there a lot. Would never hurt to turn your propane off at your house so that you don't have gas leaking potentially inside your house if there's an issue. But here's what's important to understand about, here's what's important to understand about propane, about those tanks, is if they leak at the tank, that's okay. And that it may catch fire and have flame coming out. That's important because it's venting out the gas and the heat. If a tank superheats and it builds up just like anything, it gets hot inside, ultimately the vessel that it's contained in the pressure builds up, it can only withstand so much pressure as that gas is boiling, is turned inside, and essentially it will explode. And that is much more dangerous to have and it's called a BLEVE, a boiling expanded vapor explosion. And
They called it a flash to me.
yes, but so
It's a flash fire. They said it went out, it caught the half a tree, but it didn't.
and it's counterintuitive, but that's actually better to have that tank off gas and catch fire versus the tank itself build up heat and explode. So yeah.
I feel much better.
Okay, I know we had some, okay, right. Let's go here first and then we'll go back.
Yeah, on that 200-foot zone, what are we supposed to do in that 200-foot zone? Between 100 and 200?
Really depends, on what you have and the size of the material and the trees and the vegetation. As you start getting out past 100 feet, it's really about just trying to reduce the ability for the fire to get into the crowns, the tops of the trees, or which means cleaning up the ladder fuel so that it can't climb from the ground up. It also has a lot to do with the separation of the vegetation, the trees. You don't want the fire to move from one crown or one tree to the next, so it's the spacing. And again, it all depends on what kinds of vegetation you have. Someone has to really come out and help you and look at it. Brush is treated differently than oaks and conifers, and so, but it's really not, it's not moonscaping, and this isn't taking a bulldozer to your entire property, right? And that would certainly be fire safe. But it's just about trying, out in those zones, it's trying to reduce the spread and the intensity of the fire out in that area. So get back here.
For chips, if a tree has been chipped, in the past, they would have you thinly spread it in your fields and then the grasses, and eventually everything makes more soil. Now, are they telling you to take all your chips off your property, or can you still thinly spread it in your field?
Putting some of that back out, spread out thinly, is still okay. The reality of it is when, and because it's actually helpful, it's going to prevent erosion, and it provides some organic material back on the surface of the soil. Where the problem gets in is when you start getting 4, 6, 12 inches of that material. Then when fire does get in there, it smolders and can skunk around and carry fire.
Flames light too.
Yeah, so the more material you have, the higher the flames. You know, the longer the flame is, the more intense it is. But it's actually healthy to have a thin, layer. And the basic work you're doing around your home, that would not create enough of a fire issue. I mean, you want to get it spread out away from the home, but yeah, you want that. Yes?
Thank you for a very comprehensive overview of that, the efforts you're doing out there. It's very useful.
Oh, good.
My question goes to evaluation. There's a lot of public as well as private monies that are going into these efforts. What kind of resources or what kind of plans are there out there to have both short-term and long-term evaluations of the outcomes of all this effort?
Very good question. So we're putting a lot of public money and local efforts and private efforts into doing this work out on the ground. How do we show what we've done with it? And then 2 is how do we maintain it over time? And that's been the biggest challenge. And so that's, again, why the county's working really hard to coordinate and pull these things together, tracking the projects in one place. The county's establishing a data hub where all these efforts are coordinated in one place. We'll have a dashboard where folks can see the status of projects over time and see where defensible space work is going on, where fuel breaks, and then where we need to go back in and do maintenance down the road. But the idea being public facing so everyone can see the accomplishments and where both public funds and all these community efforts are going.
So if there's a fire in the future, you'll have a way of evaluating that fire did or did not burn a community down because of what that community did?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So it sounds like we're about needing to wrap up here pretty quick, right? So are we still good? Are we okay? Oh, sorry, okay. Over here, yes.
Yeah, well, I live in a senior mobile home park, and there are 2 exits that's here in Diamond Spring.
Yeah.
And I think, well, okay, so I hear that I should evacuate, and maybe it was the sheriffs who came knocking on the doors, but I don't think so because there are so many places in this park. And so I'm thinking, how do I know where to go? I keep thinking, okay, I'm as prepared as I can be. I have a backpack full of all kinds of stuff in my car for 6 months, just in case. But if there is an evacuation order like that, I mean, could I assume that there would be a sheriff's deputy there to tell us to whether to go out Missouri Flat Road or China Garden or what?
So the question is, she lives in a mobile home park with 2 ingress and egress routes, fully prepared, been planning for evacuations, understands all of that, but then the fire occurs and evacuations have been ordered. Can I expect that there will be a sheriff's deputy, a firefighter, or someone there that can help instruct me on where to go? And plan for no. And again, it's all the dynamics of, did the fire just start and they're calling for immediate evacuations? There hasn't been time for anybody to organize and put a plan together. That's where it's just knowing your community and the situational awareness about where the fire is at and having this pre-planned as best you can. That versus a fire that's been burning like the Caldor fire for multiple days, they're already gaming out what the evacuation strategies are and when those next pieces come. You more than likely, yes, will have a sheriff's deputy or other public official helping you understand the appropriate evacuation routes because they've had time to plan. It's these smaller, immediately emerging fires or any other emergencies are where the biggest challenges are, because there isn't time necessarily for everybody to get there. And I'm talking minutes and time here. Over time, yes, you could expect that. So it's really, truly, you've got to sometimes understand making those split decisions, but that's knowing your community and knowing your routes is the key here, and understanding where the fire's at to be able to do that. The questions, let's go here.
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the programs that were available, the services for older adults, and it sounded to me like you said one or two of those programs were based on income eligibility. Are they all, or just some of them?
The Defensible Space program for seniors, veterans, and low income, that one has a component of low income, but it's also, if you can, as a veteran, can produce a DD-214, or I believe they're using the federal age of 60 years to be the eligibility requirement from the age perspective. The chipping program has there's no restrictions there. And going back to the defensible space, the income level, there's a formula they're using based, I believe, on the state social vulnerability income level, and it's there.
That will be on your website?
Yes, it's when you go to apply, that's there. The hazard tree removal one, that's got a much more complex social or income sliding scale, but all of that will be explained on the website as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I think here, yes.
How do you get the Forest Service to clean up the ladder fuel on their tree farm in Camino?
That's a good question. I will tell you the Forest Service has been at the table in the advisory committee from the beginning and has made some pretty significant commitments, including trying to bring money and funding to their side of the fence, if you will, bordering the wildland-urban interface. And they've come to the Fire Safe Council to work out, and the county to figure that out. They've also provided funding to the Fire Safe Council for a number of projects. When I talked about the almost $14 million in grant funding, several $1 million of that is money that's called Stevens Authority. It's a federal act, a piece of legislation. It's providing money directly to the fire safe councils along the forest boundary to get much of that work done. And so they are doing a lot of work. Obviously, there are those specific areas that we could all do more in. But at the end of the day, we're at the table with them. They're engaged. We as community members have to continue to obviously hold all of us accountable to ensure we're getting the work done. And I think that's the value of the Fire Safe Council, but it's also now the value of the county stepping up and engaging, because sort of having those hard conversations. But where we're finding success is where the Fire Safe Councils are working collectively with the Forest Service and others to get work done. Fire Adapted 50 is a perfect example of where so much work is getting done in Pollock and Camino and along that whole corridor.
So should she contact her Fire Safe Council?
Yes, and that would be up there is, I don't know if that would be Camino Fire Safe Council.
When you miss last night's meeting.
They're right across the street
Right.
from me, and I've got all this stuff.
Yep. Well, and this is the part where when I opened with in the beginning, it's 10% of us are doing 90% of the work, and a lot of you are those people, that 10%. But at the end of the day, we can all see things that are wrong. We can also help engage and help fix it, and that's where the most of the work that's getting done is because community members are rolling up their sleeves. They're not asking anybody else to do it for them. They're engaging and they're having the hard conversations with the forest. We're all kind of holding each other accountable. But it's the bake sales, the hot dog feeds, and the community green waste days, all the way up to these $2 million roadside fuels reduction projects. They're happening because community members aren't asking somebody else to do it for them. They're stepping in and leading the effort. The only way we're going to accomplish a fire-resilient El Dorado County is we can't just ask the Forest Service and CAL FIRE and everybody else to, yes, we have to ask them to come with us, but we have to be there too. And we've got to show that commitment and effort and roll our sleeves up. So let's go here and then there.
I'm not quite sure how to ask what I think might be a very sensitive question about to eradicate their responsibility for it. And I've just seen, well, especially a place in Butte County, hundreds of thousands of trees, and then the tree behind that tree, and the tree, and it just, people are kind of wondering, are they doing the right thing?
So the question is PG&E, who were out clearing lines in response to the wildfire challenges, are they, well, I'm going to maybe paraphrase a bit, but are they doing enough? Are they doing the right thing? And it's not just PG&E, let's just talk about this in the context of all of the electrical utilities. Look, I think it's fair to say, especially for PG&E, but it's also inclusive of the Southern California public-owned utilities, or investor-owned rather. But PG&E owns 2/3 probably of the infrastructure in the state as far as distribution and providing that network and power. No one, I think, can argue that over time, we skated as a state. We got by. We were sort of betting that we weren't going to have these kind of challenges. We saw things coming, but we weren't seeing the fires. This wasn't happening. Maybe it was a one-off. Wasn't happening to me. PG&E is doing the same thing. They didn't clearly make the investments that they could have made early on. And obviously we're seeing with the changing conditions, it's creating much more stress on the distribution network. The vegetation has grown up, so now we have a very receptive fuel bed. And we're seeing significant fire starts from aging hardware and a receptive bed of vegetation. So they're cranking up, of course, their work, and of course it's to mitigate the liability associated with that. They have a mandate that they're operating under the Public Utility Commission mandates that they're regulated under. The reason they're not taking certain trees is, yes, they are a company, and yes, they have a very strict requirement for where they're going through the easements to remove trees, and they've got this network of tens of thousands of miles of power lines. And this is not me defending them, but this is me trying to explain that they're only going to take the trees they have to take because they've got all of these trees to take. And when we as property owners are sitting there, and I have them, I've got power lines coming through mine, I would absolutely love them to do more. But at the end of the day, they're under a prescription, and they've widened out their prescription because of the impacts of weather and climate on where fires are starting. But they're going to stick to those prescriptions. It's created a lot of challenge. And with the complaints we get across the board from fire safe councils and at the county, oftentimes there's a mess left behind. They're not necessarily always cleaning up the material, particularly the large logs from the trees. It's unsightly. In some places it's working very well. In other places, some of that customer service piece isn't necessarily where we would like to see it. What we've found is that, and we have a very good representative from PG&E right now. He's a retired CAL FIRE division chief, Mike Webb. He has been very connected with us at the fire safe councils. But he's very operationally oriented. Their section that does veg management is in a different place. But they are trying hard to try to work with us. But at the end of the day, I will be the first to tell you, they're a large company, and it has been hard sometimes to get the level of engagement and service that we would like to see on the ground. But again, it comes back to us continuing to advocate with them and push the issues and raising and elevating those issues when they come up. They change contractors, so oftentimes contractors have a different sort of vision for how they think it should look. We have challenges with disposing of the material. If anybody's driven Mount Occam Road almost to the post office, just past the DiAugustini Pond, you'll see there's stacks of logs sitting there now, and that's from Mountain Enterprises that was doing the work for PG&E, and there's no place to take the logs. Nobody's buying the logs, and how do we dispose of that material? We can't burn all of that large biomass material. County's working with other collaboratives to try to find opportunities in the future for treating that. But that's one of the disincentives for not only these large companies, but even the small operations. It's one thing to cut and chip small material or burn it. Large log material is sometimes a challenge to deal with. So that's just one more additive challenge of cleaning up and getting it done. there's a lot of discussion happening about that. It's been a long-standing issue for decades, trying to make it the cogeneration facilities, this non-merchantable material or other material, how do we get it to pay its way out of the woods? It's very cost prohibitive to transport. The idea of who buys the electricity that you generate, it's very expensive to generate that electricity versus other sources. So it's been a real disincentive for electrical companies to buy that material and invest in that. Lots of discussions out there, even here in El Dorado County, there are a lot of discussions about some opportunities that could come forward and maybe having some example or pilot programs, including the Black Oak Mine Unified School District is actually applying for some grants to do a small distributed facility right there, I think on 2 campuses within the school district. So a lot of effort going on. It's been a very tough nut to crack. Yes?
I live on the hill above Weber Creek.
Yes?
I have cleaned up all around my property. There's a big power line on my property, on one edge, and PG&E power line. I had a big pine tree fall at least 2 years ago. It's still there.
They,
I pay almost $4,000 a year for fire insurance.
yeah, and have you contacted their, we can probably get you connected up with somebody at PG&E, and what we found is you got to find the right folks and just be absolutely persistent.
That's what I want to do.
Well, we'll help you with that. But since you mentioned Weber Creek, I wanted to mention one large initiative that's going on along the Weber Creek drainage from Sacramento Hill to Cedar Ravine. Above Cedar Creek, kind of both in unincorporated and in the city of Placerville. The county has applied for a $25 million grant from FEMA and state OES to treat 525 homes in a focus area there for defensible space and home hardening. So if approved, and this is going through a pilot program that the state is offering, and we're considering that we most likely will get approved, but OES, the State Office of Emergency Services, is championing the project for us. But it will potentially offer each of the homes within the pilot area up to $40,000 to do defensible space and home hardening upgrades, i.e. siding, windows, vents. With the idea being we want to demonstrate if we can do, and it goes back to the question we had in the back earlier, how do we show people successes and how this works? We're trying to pick a pilot and target area where we can get almost 100% of a focus area treated, work through the processes of how we might implement a program like this, and then try to replicate it in other parts of the county. There are 4 other counties in California that are part of this program. 3 of them were approved in the first go-round in Shasta, San Diego, and Lake. And now El Dorado and Tuolumne are in this next round of applications that we're just waiting to hear back from FEMA on. But this is the first time we're really seeing this level of support for fire prevention coming from the federal emergency management and the Cal OES side. And so, I realize budgets are not necessarily where they were last year, but we're certainly hopeful if we can really make this a demonstration that we can get continued support to do this in other places. And one of the reasons why I was running late before I got here today, I was on the phone with the county. We were working through how are we going to help fund some of our defensible space efforts this year. I can tell you the county is, right up to the chief administrative officer, are very interested in finding ways to get this support out to everybody to get work done. Historically, we have not helped or paid for, and Mark knows this because this is what we lived, if it's defensible space and it's 100 feet from your home, the law says you as a homeowner have to do that, and we're not going to pay for it. And to some extent, I was part of enforcing that for my whole career. But at the end of the day, it's a partnership, and if we can find opportunities to provide incentives, we just want this to get done. And it's not always about going out and enforcing and pounding on the ground. It's how do we kind of meet in the middle? If we can bring resources to homeowners to help, we just need the homeowner to do their part and kind of match that with the capabilities that the homeowner brings and resources with what else we can provide. Ultimately, if that's what it takes to get it done, then I think that's where it's going. And I think that's what the county's really interested in. They really want us to ramp up our ability to get homeowners where they need to be. So, yes?
What's your website?
It is, I'm going to back this up so I don't get it wrong. Oh, here, I can read it right off of here. It's, of course, www.edcfiresafe, that's edcfiresafe.org. And again, I caution everybody, it's, the website was built a number of years ago, and it was really working well until we just exceeded our capacity. So for example, the Defensible Space Program for seniors requires pictures. The evaluators will go out, take a pre-picture, the work gets done, and then the contractor submits a post-picture to confirm the work was done. Well, all these things have been adding up. It's all been stored and entered in through the website. And that's just one example, but now we have 29 associate councils that also have their web pages attached to it. We just sort of finally collapsed the system. And so we're working with the website host to fix it and actually build a more robust system. And it needs to get, the whole look of the website needs to be fixed, and also needs to be more user-friendly. What we're finding, particularly with the senior community, is that it's a little cumbersome to work through some of the application processes. And then, as we know, in our county, particularly rural parts of the county, our connectivity isn't super good. So I'm trying to make sure things are as simple as possible. So don't go there today and get discouraged. Go there, it's working, but over time, in the next month or two, it's going to obviously be a lot better. So edcfiresafe.org. Yes?
I live in Shingle Springs, and when you look at communities like Shingle Springs, Cameron Park, we had a fire in our community last year started by a gardener who was out on a 118-degree day, weed eating with a metal object. Is there any communication, and his family speaking, is there any communication being done by the fire safe councils to try to help and educate? That community obviously needs the money, like all of us, on the rights and wrongs of when to do certain things.
So the question is, how are we, obviously a lot of the work that's getting done for defensible space and hazardous fuels reduction is getting done by this diverse workforce and folks that aren't necessarily English speaking. And that's it's absolutely a huge issue. And to be honest, including the Fire Safe Council, but across the board in El Dorado County, we have not done a very good job about helping in the bilingual arena. And the challenge is we just look at the population and it doesn't show a lot of non-English speakers. What we're not even taking into consideration is this workforce that's part of our community every day doing all of this work. So we have to do a better job. CAL FIRE has materials in Spanish, but even they are challenged because they don't necessarily always have access to very many Spanish-speaking employees that can help articulate. We're all struggling with that same piece, and we need to do a better job there.
So maybe post a link to it on our next doors that says talk to your gardener.
Yes. Yes.
As you drive around those communities, and El Dorado Hills as well, you have a lot of those gardeners out doing work.
Yep, and like you said, they're trying to get their work done, they're trying to make their money, and they may or may not be paying attention to the fire conditions that are out there. And so yes, we probably need to keep posting to everybody that's employing folks to say it's really your responsibility, because when they start that fire, you're just as responsible as the employer in championing that project.
That was going along with that, when the fire happened, that's what the community was wondering, who was going to pay for this huge effort that came in to put out that fire, which we were very appreciative of, but we were just curious, whose responsibility is that?
So here's how it works. So question is, who pays for the response to these to really any wildland fire? So civil code basic.
This is a wildland, this is more urban.
Right, but so many of those fires expand and become large. So within the state responsibility area, in both the Public Resources Code and the Health and Safety Code and the Civil Code all talk about responsibility. And at the end of the day, it's the homeowner or it's the person. There's a whole suite of people that can be held accountable when a wildland fire is negligently started. And negligence is a broad category. And you can just say, well, it was an accident. Well, there's an expectation as a reasonable and prudent person that we're not going to be weed eating or doing something that could cause a spark, on a fire day, on a wild. We as the person doing it, but also we as the homeowner have a responsibility because we've employed that person. So the law allows, and honestly, this is something that the state pursues fairly heavily. The law allows for a negligently started fire, the state to pursue the full cost of the suppression of the wildland fire. And there are thresholds that can be met, but at the end of the day, a fire like the Caldor fire cost over $250 million. Your average fire may just be an hour or two of resources, but just launching one air tanker from Grass Valley or McClellan or Columbia to come here and back can be tens of thousands of dollars. And so what happens is the CAL FIRE's Civil Cost Recovery Program looks at every fire. Every fire has a fire report generated. And in that fire report, there's a cause and origin. And the small ones oftentimes are under a threshold that there is no action taken. Sometimes that could involve an educational component to say it doesn't do the state any good to go after. But the first places they're going to look are you insured? And your homeowner's insurance policy, the civil cost program will go after the insurance. Unfortunately, they'll look at your assets. And this is a big deal. And they'll look at what responsibility did you have all the resources and tools and shovels and able-bodied people out there when you were doing this? And so all those things can work in your favor to sort of help negate the impact of the fire, the cost recovery. But at the end of the day, ultimately, when I retired as the chief of CAL FIRE, I was looking at every civil cost that met a threshold. It came to the director's desk. And the things I saw were children playing with matches, all the way up to illegal, marijuana operations, to faulty electrical systems, to, of course, all of the PG&E things, to literally people out striking a rock with a golf club. I mean, on these critical fire days, when your humidities are down low and fires start. And so I think that's the take-home message is, yes, you could be held liable civilly for fires. Now, there's a whole criminal component comes in if it was, of course, intentional, and that's a different piece. But it's the civil piece that gets most people, and it's definitely a reality, and people should be concerned, and that's what you try to convey to people, is that you could lose your assets. Yes?
Could you please clarify the part about veterans, seniors, and low income on your website and what you were just saying today? Clarify, if you're a senior but you're not low income. If you're a veteran but you're not low income.
Or not a senior.
Yeah, I know, it's like
Yeah, what's that? Do you have to be all those or one of those only? If you're a senior, say, because
right.
that's the group?
No, so clarifying the Defensible Space Program for seniors, veterans, and low income. The eligibility is one or any combination thereof. So if you're a senior meeting that, like I said, I believe it's 60 and older, you're eligible. If you're a veteran with a qualified DD-214, you're eligible. And then again, the low income, we've been very flexible also on the income piece. It's, it's a sensitive area to be in, but I believe they're looking for basic income, some proof of income, and I don't recall it's on the website. But yes, it's individually, any of those would qualify you.
Thank you.
Yes?
Is there a process in place that we should know about if we have property that abuts BLM land? And there's all kinds of hazardous material on the ground, dead standing trees, on BLM land that's really right up next to private property, and a number of areas in the county.
So
Is there a process to approach
yes.
BLM?
Yes. So the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, obviously owns land around, and more so in patches than we might find, the National Forest, which tends to be more of a line the further up you go. So the question is, how do we engage with BLM on the parcels where they're abutting private land and there may need to be hazardous fuels treatment? They are absolutely at the table. They attend the Fire Safe Council meetings monthly. Matter of fact, we just discussed with them this week at our monthly meeting about their bringing some money to the table. They are always looking for opportunities to partner, and I think they just need to be able to identify, where some of those treatment areas are needed. Matter of fact, we'll probably be meeting with BLM this next week to look at how we can coordinate just the question that you're asking. In the short term, the individual fire safe councils have been very active in identifying where particularly the BLM parcels are and trying to get some assistance there. So that would be the first step, is depending on where you're located, is engaging the Fire Safe Council and see what actions may already be in the works, or highlighting that for the council and seeing if there's something you can specifically work out. Obviously, a lot of work's gone on in the Pine Hill Preserve in the greater Cameron Park area, but we're looking at, there's areas now just south of here in Martinez Creek that BLM's been approached to look at, and there's other areas, of course, around the county. They haven't always been at the table. They are absolutely ready to go and want to find those opportunities. They're under mandates to really work along the border because that's where most of their, obviously, impacts are with the communities. So I would...
suggestion is to go through the Fire Safe Council rather than direct to BLM.
Well, you can certainly always call would never discourage you from going directly to BLM. I think what you'll find is there's more strength in going to the community of people who may already have the relationship or have similar concerns, and you sort of can go in mass.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Just being a property owner and having two large parcels that are on either side of our acreage, that we know who the property owners are, but over the years they have never done anything to clear their property, to do any kind of fire break or anything, and those properties, we keep our property, and we've spent a considerable amount of money, keeping our property cleared, but our efforts will be for nil if a fire gets started on the property directly behind us and to the side of us. We might as well just say, oh well, because their properties, there's no chance that will crown up over our property. And is that something that the fire council could assist us in, contacting these homeowners or whatever? Because we've contacted them, sent them, letters to no avail.
So, and this is a common question. So the question is, what do you do about the adjacent non-occupied parcels that are typically owned by absentee owners? The law doesn't provide, there's no teeth at the state or local ordinance level that addresses vacant parcels of any size, with the exception, let me paraphrase that. If you live in Cameron Park or El Dorado Hills, there are vacant lot ordinances within those jurisdictions that have some authority to abate. Beyond that, there's no authority within the state or at the county ordinance to do any abatement on those vacant parcels, with the exception of if your home is within 100 feet of their property and you can't get your 100-foot clearance and it needs to be extended onto their property to get that, the county ordinance does allow for that. Although it's a bit tricky. Beyond that, it really becomes a peer pressure. And yes, I think in many cases, local fire safe councils have outreach efforts and may be able to help in that effort. But at the end of the day, what we're finding is, particularly from the absentee owners, they don't have the vested interest in it that the rest of us do. They're not living it every day, and it may just be an investment for them, not part of what they're doing every day. And so I think it's consistent peer pressure and absolutely working through the Fire Safe Council. But beyond that, it's the Resource Conservation District has done some great work bringing vacant parcel owners, property owners, absentee on board by doing mass mailings when they're funded to do projects. But there's no real silver bullet other than peer pressure and constant badgering to try to encourage these folks to engage. It's a hard one. We're all struggling with it.
You could offer to buy it.
You can. It's always an option. Of course, then you own all the challenges, right? But
I think I have the money for 250,000 acres.
yeah, and particularly the larger ownerships, yeah, they're often just investments, and they don't put that in.
Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.